Good afternoon, everyone. So the last session of the day with 4 outstanding presentations. So I ask, hold on for the next 45 minutes so you can hear from our speakers. I'm Tina Christie. I had an opportunity to briefly introduce myself this morning. I am Dean of the School of Education and Information Studies at UCLA. And after a day of outstanding presentations and discussions designed to inform local action here in California, and of course other localities, you know well that the ST in our MAST approach is societal transformation, so that we can help all Californians understand and contribute to California's climate resilience. Societal transformation requires promoting a clear and hopeful vision for a thriving and resilient world, connecting with existing and shared fundamental values, and creating tangible pathways for evolving behaviors, institutions, and power structures to support and implement a just transition to a climate-adapted society. You heard in our previous panel a discussion of the relationship between climate and health, and of course, earlier in the day, the role of education from panelists, in particular, our student panelists, several of whom I am proud to say attend our outstanding UCLA pre-K through 12 schools. The illustrious panelists we have in this session will address further issues central to societal transformation. Because we have 4 important talks in a very tight time slot, I am not going to read the bios of our speakers, but rather hand it over to them to get started and to introduce themselves. So our first speaker is Andra Yeghoian. Andra, I will turn it over to you. She is the CIO from 10 Strands.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I'm really grateful to be here. You can go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. So I'm Andrea Yeghoian, and I'm here representing, thank you, 10 Strands. We're a nonprofit that the mission to strengthen the partnerships and strategies that will bring environmental literacy to all of California's TK-12 schools. And I just put a little bit here about my bio. This is really important to me to be here because I've been doing this work for almost 20 years. First as a classroom teacher, bringing environmental literacy into my humanities classes, and then as the first full-time site level director of sustainability in California, and then as a first full-time environmental literacy and sustainability coordinator at a county office of ed. And now I'm here at 10 Strands, really working to bring this work to all of our schools. So next slide, please. I think what I wanted to share here is that I'm just so grateful that CRC2 is helping to elevate schools as a critical part of the societal transformation narrative. Unfortunately, TK-12 schools are often overlooked as a catalyst for accelerating transformative change, even though they're a really critical part of the social fabric of any given community. And so we're excited to be able to share this message of just how important schools are. So go ahead and go to the next slide. The main point here that I'm going to capture in this brief section is that TK-12 schools are a central strategy to local sustainability and resilience initiatives. Next slide. And the main reason for that is that just to ground this in like putting people into their local community. When you drive around a local community, you probably see the presence of TK-12 schools. They're a significant landowner that is spread across neighborhoods all over any given community. They're also a really important employer, right? They employ at schools, but also the local vendors who serve the schools. And then socially, our schools instill the knowledge, values, and skills in any given community, and also provide that being that social anchor and providing those physical and mental health services. So schools are really critical, and they are often seen as a trusted messenger. Next slide. When it comes to emergencies, K-12 schools are also really important in any given local community. They protect a vulnerable population during an emergency if it happens during school hours. They also become emergency shelters for housing and assistance. They provide meal service for breakfast and lunch for many, many students. And they provide that learning and socializing between 8 and 4 that needs to continue on, just even as we're doing the recovery phases. They also provide the psychological support for students, staff, and families. You may have also noticed recently, especially with the LA wildfires, wildfires and all of the different emergencies that we've been experiencing, the floods that happened very recently up here in Northern California, the damage to schools often a central focus of media coverage. And that's, again, centering this idea that K-12 schools are so important in a local community. Next slide. So by positioning TK-12 schools as pillars of sustainability and community resilience, economic stability, and social transformation, schools can become an active agent of change for resilience instead of just a recipient of disaster response or sustainability funding. So strengthening schools means strengthening the resilience of the whole community. Next slide. So there's really two pathways forward to really think about here when it comes to bringing this work into TK-12 schools. Next slide. The first pathway is the inclusion of TK-12 schools in action and resilience planning. So next slide. And I want to give just a couple examples of this. So as I mentioned before, schools already play a vital role in emergency response in any given community. And so it's really critical that state and local climate resilience frameworks and processes bring those TK-12 schools partners into the planning process. I worked in the San Mateo County Office of Education for 5 years, and I was really lucky to have a county superintendent who really was centering her work around emergency response and began to bring in this climate ready mindset. And so San Mateo County has a wealth of resources of how to do this, including bringing schools into local hazard and mitigation planning. We also this last year worked with a number of different local education agencies, including San Diego County Office of Education, that talked in their storytelling with us in the toolkit that's mentioned here at the bottom of the slide. They talked about how they had to work very closely with the Office of Emergency at their county government level to bring in the schools during disasters such as wildfires and floods. And so it's really critical that these players work together and that schools are brought into that climate action and resilience planning from the start. Next slide. It's also really important that schools are brought into the climate action planning process. So while I was working in San Mateo County, we actually led and participated in some really critical climate mitigation and resilience planning that was going on there. And I know that San Mateo County was on the forefront of doing some of this work, but it was really exciting to be a part of it. So one of the things that we did from our Office of Education is that we analyzed all the different city and town climate action plans, and we looked for goals and opportunities where they overlapped with schools. And then we pushed that back out to both the schools and the cities and towns to say, hey, we need to work together. Schools shouldn't just be these tiny little islands within the cities and towns. They should be key partners in doing that climate action planning. And then the other thing was that we were a very active participant in Climate Ready San Mateo County initiative, which was one of the first local blueprint resilient planning partnerships that went on. And it was really important to have schools there. There was during the year of convenings that we did, there would be over 200 people in the room each time, and people would constantly say, well, we really need our schools to do this. We really need our schools. And there was very little representation of schools. So again, extending that invitation to schools will be really critical for doing climate action planning and resilience planning. Next slide. I also just want to share here that we have a lot of data now of how climate is impacting California, and something that we've done at 10 Strands in partnership with UC Berkeley and our partners at Undaunted K-12 is we've analyzed that data and made it user-friendly for schools in a way that can really help them understand that just how much high heat, air quality, wildfires, extreme precipitation, how much these things are impacting them, and how they can think about looking ahead in the next couple decades to start doing that planning. And to remember that we should not leave these partners behind. Schools are so critical to bring into that planning process as local communities start to think about dealing with these crises. Next slide. Second pathway I just wanted to mention is just this idea that we also need to infuse sustainability and resilience into TK-12 schools. So we need to move from a green schools movement at some schools to environmental and climate action being at the core of public education. And that means really bringing it into both the curriculum, but also across the campus and the community and culture. And the image here that's on this slide, if you are able to see it, is this image of a school that has solar panels and wind turbines and a schoolyard forest and it has gardens and it's got rain barrels and it has electric vehicle charging stations and zero waste bins. And so the idea would be that we want to see these schools in every single community so that we're really driving home that message of sustainability and resilience, and that schools are a critical leader for that. Next slide. And the good news is we have data about how far along our schools are in our state. So in our state, we have about 10,000 TK-12 schools. We recently did an analysis of the 1,000 school districts that are that those schools are a part of. And we now have a landscape of just how far along our school districts are in the process of integrating environmental and climate action. So we invite partners to be looking at that data and thinking about how can we make strategic investments in our TK-12 schools to bring them along in this process of the transformation to sustainability and climate resilience. It's hard to do that without data, and we want to use that data to identify gaps and opportunities for that investment and strategic partnership. Next slide. The other thing we have are tools. Karen Cow, our CEO, mentioned earlier today that we have a Seeds to Solution curriculum. So we're going to have a curriculum that will model how to do the teaching of climate change and environmental justice in every single grade level. So that's coming out this spring. And then we also worked in partnership with CCE, a state agency, on putting together a toolkit for how schools can start this process today of adopting a climate-ready mindset. So there's tools and resources that are out there, and people don't have to start from scratch. Next slide. So next slide. The last thing I just wanted to kind of end on this message is, again, public education is really an area where we should be making investments, because we should be positioning TK-12 schools really as pillars of sustainability and resilience so that we can catalyze that transformation that we want to see. We want to see that the world becomes what we teach and do. And so we want to see that happening in our schools. And so if you needed a call to action, last slide, if you're a climate resilience planner and you're here on this call, then the message for you is incorporate TK-12 schools as a core constituent and key partner in climate resilience planning. If you're an educator, the message for you is make environmental and climate action a core focus of what you're doing in education, and partner with us if you are looking for resources to how to do that. And for youth, it was amazing to see that youth panel earlier today. Keep on raising up your voice and participating and elevating that critical perspective that you brought today. Thank you. That's it for me. And I will introduce our next speaker is Megan Speiser.
Thanks, Sandra. It's lovely to be with you all today. I'm Megan Speiser, and I'm Executive Director of Eco America. I'm going to talk specifically about the people part of societal transformation. So how we move societal transformation for climate action forward better and faster by connecting with, listening to, and engaging a broader diversity of people in this work. Next slide. So right now, people in the United States, if they're hearing anything about climate change, it's all the bad things. It's the impacts, devastating data, people's lives getting decimated, and it's awful, and it's true. But environmentalists are also not connecting with them. And we at Eco America do a lot of research, and I'll tell you that at best, the kinds of things that the environmentalists are talking about only resonate with about 15% of the population. So, it's the kinds of things that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. And think of it as, people who are listening are also voters. So, but wouldn't we all want to be working for a better world? So let's paint that picture for ourselves, our communities, and our policymakers. So people are not sustainably motivated to prevent bad things, but they can have boundless energy and deep reserves for working for a better world. So the list on the right is just a start. And we can commit to communicating a brighter future for all. I love the shared visions shared earlier of keeping the California dream alive. That's a start. Next slide. So at Eco America, we're a nonprofit. We've done over $1 million of research on what will motivate everyday people living in America to move climate solutions and policy forward. And so we then apply that research to work with over 110 national partners in 3 sectors: faith, so denominations of faith, health, and local communities. And we do this because Americans need to see people in their daily lives leading on this issue and being invited into action in ways that are personally relevant for them. We've also trained about 10,000 folks to be vocal and visible advocates in their communities, and have launched campaigns to provide action as well. So we're talking about policy solutions in this forum. We're talking about programming, structural and physical ways to bring about climate resilience, and of course, the impact of climate overall. And what we need to complete the cycle is a social mandate. The majority of the public needs to identify climate solutions as a priority. And the good news is we're nearly there. We need to get over the finish line, and what we need is a movement for climate and resiliency solutions that aligns with everyday American values. Next slide. So what do Americans currently see the climate movement doing? Well, they see us being rebels with direct action and saying no to things. And my slide is not showing up quite right here, but there should be 3 check marks on rebels, four check marks. We're doing that really well. And they may see us engage with policymakers, so that reformer role. But social scientists have studied the successful elements of any social movement in the United States. And I can go on about this for days, but given our timing, I'll boil it down to what's needed. What we're really missing is the citizen role. And that's grounding the work we're doing in language and actions that everyday Americans can resonate with and get on board with and engage with. And think of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream vision and what the actions associated with that meant. We could also do better with educating a broader diversity of the public. And Andra just talked about K through 12 or TK through 12. Faith communities can also be helpful with both of the above. And we as an organization work with over 25 denominations to do just that. And we welcome your partnership. Next slide. We've studied the gaps we needed to fill to win on this issue. I'm going to skip this for now for the sake of time, but happy to chat with anyone afterwards. So next slide. Yeah, thanks. So the important thing is to know what makes people motivated to act and what will bring them along. So I'm inviting all of you to be more people focused and connect with and listen to people in your communities. So here's what to know. Only about 15 to 18% of the population considers themselves activists. Another 40% want to be part of the solution. 70% or more are concerned about climate, but most people think that others around them are not. And this is called pluralistic ignorance, and it leads to inaction. The good news is the antidote is visible climate leadership, which is what I'm talking about today. People also have a thin tolerance for fear, so they'd rather engage in winning efforts that are inspirational and are socially safe for them. And most people are looking to local people in their daily lives for cues on what to think and how to respond. And again, faith leaders can be very helpful here. They need to see the vision and the benefits. And I know we've talked about that today, but it really is true. People will not act unless they see where they're supposed to be going and they see the benefits to their daily lives, their health, their wealth, their well-being, their community. But one thing that mediates that is that they're struggling with competing priorities. They feel unseen when we ask them to do too much because we need to show empathy and know what they're up against. They're also very locally focused. So the more we can engage folks in their neighborhoods and towns, the better, because they feel more empowered. And certainly we also need to invite a broader participation in climate action in ways that are accessible to people's lives. And so it has to look different and be different for different organizations and different people. And finally, it only takes one meaningful connection or action to open people's minds to all climate solutions. The world really opens up for them when they can make that personal connection. Next, also, we can all be effective messengers on this issue. We've turned some of our research into a 5-step guide, and we do a whole training on this. It's about an hour, but we're going to give you the short form. It's about preparing and delivering communications on climate in ways that are tailored to your audience and effective. So first and foremost, start with people. This is about connecting with people. No matter how you communicate with folks, whether they're in person, online, in communications, open the conversation with what they care about. It's not about you, it's about them. Maybe it's about their health. It's about being human, establishing connection, being humble, and voicing your shared values. Like, for instance, wanting your community to be a thriving place for all to live. At this point, you're not talking about climate change yet or resilience, but you're creating the bridge to talk about it. And you're acknowledging that not everyone is on the same page as you. So 2 is to make it real. Then you can start talking about it, about climate change and resilience, but be sure to do so in a way that is real, that people can see with their own eyes, their own lived experience. And folks today have been talking about this. Giving an example or one story is good so that you don't overwhelm folks with too many facts or figures, because to know this, that numbers numb and stories sell. And speaking of selling up, the third step is to focus on solutions and personal benefit. Again, people are hearing the bad news, which is motivating. So instead, we need to emphasize solutions, 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 and talk about the benefits they bring to our health, wealth, well-being, communities, children, security. There's so many benefits. Governor Newsom talked about this earlier when he spoke about the genius of and Jane Lubachenko also talked about it when she encouraged policymakers and scientists to talk about the so what. So what is the good news, the stories of success of climate action? Because people are moved by our hearts and our emotions, and it's something we can't forget. Next, number 4 is inspire and empower. And there's 1,000 things we can be doing to be part of the solution every day, no matter of our ability. It's very important to remind folks that we can all do something and to give them ideas, which leads to the final, which is ending with a meaningful ask. Invite folks to be part of the solution, invite them in, give them that permission to act, welcome them with warmth and open arms. So I just gave you the cliff notes of our 1-hour training, and certainly we have full recommendations that you can access online. It includes things like avoiding trigger words, redirecting argumentation, and so much more. So following my own guidance, go to the next slide. I'm ending with my asks for you is really start today by adopting that Keep the California Dream Alive vision. Co-create that vision by listening to the communities around you and connecting with churches as well and getting their input. Just as TK through 12 schools can be those hubs of resilience, so can churches, synagogues, and all kinds of houses of worship. So make sure you connect with them as well. And I just want to thank you for listening to me today. I have a couple of other things to invite you to on the next 3 slides if you want to join us for and connect with folks in the health space this coming weekend through early next week. You're welcome to do so. Next slide. We're also having this, oh, you skipped one. We're also having a National Faith and Climate Forum coming up. There it is on March 27th. There's 100 locations nationwide you can participate in to continue our discussions from today and talking what we can do locally. And then if you're looking for hope and inspiration, we are having our awards ceremony on April 16th, including so many great folks that are doing climate action nationwide. So thank you. I'm going to pass it over now to Deborah Gore-Mann.
Oh, thank you, Megan and Andra. Those are great background information and so educational. My name is Deborah Gore, and I'm the former CEO of the Green Lining Institute, and I've been doing economic and climate equity for 15 to 16 years now. So I'll, next slide. So I'm going to take you through some of the pernicious and persistent social transformations that could happen during this climate movement. So briefly, redlining, I think most people would know, it was the discriminatory practice of systematically denying resources, financial resources based on geography. Next slide. And so the maps were created that created the redlining, and here is a description that you can see the security grade was red, and the delineation of the detrimental influence was infiltration of Negroes and Orientals. And so that redlining was based on race and ethnicity. Next slide. But I think what that folks may not have known in addition was it was also categorized red if there was odors from industries and that there was a heterogeneous mixture of the properties and the predominance of foreign infiltration. But there has always been, so since the 30s, there's always been a connection to air pollution or pollution in general. Next slide. So the Cal EPA then also did some studies that further outlined the connection between redlining and environmental injustice. So in particular, usually the protection against adverse influences. So think of that as the negative climate impacts that we understand today. Next slide. So the redlining has been so pernicious and persistent. You can see the multiple ways now that if you going from my right to left, health indicators show the same pattern of mapping: transportation noise, carbon footprint. I'll share with you the CalEnviro screen, air traffic pollution, and then even other social ills, crime rates, food deserts, emergency rooms, and digital divide. So this core redlining of denying resources persists across all industries, and in particular, it has been included in how we have made environmental decisions. Next slide. So here's a provocative headline during March 2020 when we were going through the racial awakening. And as you can recall, people were taking down monuments and statues. And this opinion piece came out in the LA Times where it said, if you want to tear down monuments of racism and segregation, bulldoze LA freeways. Because those urban planning decisions were meant to divide and segregate communities, white communities from Black communities and Asian. So that redlining persisted in how we established our transportation system. Next slide. And then we had so that was the 30s up to the 60s. And in the 60s, we had this urban renewal, which was also poor policy. And that was where they eminent domain of taking back land, but not only just for freeways and highways, but also for industrial use. So you can see here on the right, Russell City is in the Bay Area, Hayward, the city of Hayward, and they took that land from Black and Hispanic communities, and they made an industrial parkway. And so by concentrating poverty and denying services, we then perpetuated these environmental decisions. Next slide. And so here I want to connect to you like the racial wealth gap and you'll see how that all connects together. But you may have heard about the racial wealth gap. So here you can see over the years the widening gap. And so here you can see the average wealth of a white family is about 1.3 million, and the average wealth of Black and Hispanic is about 212,000. Next slide. And then if you look at the emergency savings, so you can extrapolate that if you have a severe climate event and you have no savings, you can see the disparity here too, where white families have about 57% of emergency savings and Black families have about 38%. Next slide. So if you take that in combination, the wealth gap actually contributes to increased vulnerability. So if you have income inequality, then you have social vulnerability. You then this is all based on the Census Bureau and studies done by both the Federal Reserve banks all across the country. You can see that the communities that have greater income disparities will face much more significant challenges in disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. And then also the resource limitation, if you frequently lack any resources, then you have much limited ability to respond and recover because you have no savings, you have no insurance. So this kind of pulls together all this afternoon what we had heard about how we can create some safety nets or how we mitigate and create resilient communities. But this fundamental structure of how we have persisted in redlining communities, not just in the past, but also in the present, is something that we have an opportunity to transform. Next slide. And so this is just a general slide of what are those things then that we are looking to transform. And it's energy, energy, energy. And you can see that, 70, oh, this is the wrong text here, but if we are addressing the energy issue, we're addressing about 73% of the problem that we need to solve. Next slide. And so what that is the electrification of everything. So there's both the communication plans, Megan, you provided sort of this movement because understanding what it means to electrify everything, right? I think we heard from the Academy and that we need to double the global energy supply, and then we need to broaden access, and then we need to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and build resiliency. And then we have the extreme climate conditions at an unprecedented historical experience that we're having. And so understanding what that means and helping people understand how it impacts them while addressing and not repeating some of the redlining that we had in the past is also a way that we can effectively transform what we're doing. Next slide. So the other piece of now that you've seen that, you know, where you live and where your geography matters, not just in climate, but in your economic prosperity. We also have the social determinants of health. And I was fascinated by the physicians who came on before who were talking about all the different ways. And the social determinants of health was established, or the terminology was developed by the World Health Organization, where they said that there are non-medical factors that contribute to health outcomes. So outcomes like where you live, where you're born, where you're educated, what's your age, and economic stability, all then get weaved into the social fabric of a transformation. Next slide. So in California, then we have developed a thing called the Cal Enviro Screen, and you can this tool in that you can go to the Cal Enviro Screen website, and you can literally put in your zip code and to your block to see what your block or your neighborhood looks like in terms of 21 indicators. And so this mapping tool lets you know how you are positioned both through these exposure indicators, environmental indicators, health sensitivities, and social economic factors, graduation rate, housing burden. Next slide. And so what that looks like is this, right? That if you are in many ways wanting to create policy or solutions, we have, especially in the IRA and the IIJA policy, said, let us focus on those most impacted. And then you say, well, how do you know? Well, now we have these mapping tools that say those in the most impacted, both social, economic, and socioeconomic and educational should be focused first, right? Those who are most harmed. And I think we also saw a global version of this from those of us who were, those presenters who were sharing with us what was happening globally in their countries and in on their continents. And so now we can really have data to help us focus the effort to make sure that we're not negatively impacting or creating unintended consequences in areas that we know are most burdened. Next slide. So then this is creating the whole vulnerability index. So this work has been done, but you can see here that if you take the index and then you combine it with the climate, that we can really come up with really targeted universalism, where you have you have a universal solutions, but you're targeting specifically to where those, what you need in that particular community. And so now we have these vulnerability indexes that allow us to do it thoughtfully and provocatively, frankly, so that we're not just repeating the old habits of the past. And next slide. In addition to, so there an updated report now that the World Bank has also said, and I think this, you know, has been shared all day today and in particular tomorrow, where poor people lose the most when a disaster strikes, right? That if it's a hurricane, and this is an old example, but we know that, and it was shared previously, because, and now you can see, because you have been targeted into certain communities that were had lack of resources, had also had the freeways, had urban renewal. So the structure that you have, and then you have the lack of income and you have the lack of savings. So just the structure means that it's really much more detrimental for low income and poor people than it is for people who are. And then the second there with the agriculture, the agriculture there, a key driver on the impact of poverty, and that was shared also with the speaker who talked about farming and agriculture in California, that impacts food prices. And lastly, the global impact we've heard all day. Next slide. We also saw now the economic impact that was shared. The next slide, I don't have to do this one. Next slide. And then we see the trend of the soaring cost and how now it will impact the communities most vulnerable the hardest. And I want to get to this last two slides here. So this slide here, I just want to share that climate impact is regressive, right? So you can see in this chart here that the more economically destabilized you are, the more of the higher impact that the climate change damage will do. So if in the bottom, the richest 10%, you see that they have less of a relative economic impact. And then as you get the poorest 10%, they're disproportionately impacted. And then lastly, I'll leave you with this. Last slide. And I have a couple slides, but we'll skip through those. So in the African American church tradition, there's a notion of hush harbors, where the community could not worship in churches without being segregated. And so what they would do is they would go out into the forest, and they would create opportunities for them to come together and talk about their freedom, and talk about their safety and the oppression, or how they could create the hope and the community knowledge of persisting through challenging times. And I would argue that, we have climate hush harbors now. We hear from the young people, and we hear from our academies, and we hear different pockets. Schools and educators are having the conversations of how we can persist, and that we can create these safe and community-driven spaces to do this climate adaptation, and using and lifting up some shared traditional ecological knowledge, and organize for environmental justice. So with that, I will hand over to our last speaker.
Thank you, Deborah. My name is Erin Coutts. I am the Executive Director of the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative for Climate Action and Sustainability, known locally as LARC. LARC is housed at UCLA, and I'm joining you today from Westwood, which is the traditional unceded ancestral territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples. I'm here today to talk to you about the Alliance for Regional Collaboratives for Climate Action for Climate Adaptation. Next slide. Thanks. I want to start off by talking about individual climate action. This CRC Summit is a 2-day intensive course in climate resilience. I know you have learned so much already about the work that needs to be done and why, and I hope that we are convincing you that we have the solutions that we need to adapt to our changing climate. But right now, the magnitude of the work may feel overwhelming. As our last 3 speakers have shared, we need profound transformation of our society, our policy, our economy, and our culture. So to help you narrow your focus on how you can contribute to this transformation, I offer you the climate Venn diagram, the work of the brilliant Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. Dr. Johnson invites you to ask yourself, what are you good at? What work needs doing? And what brings you joy or satisfaction? What gets you out of bed in the morning? Choose a climate action that energizes and enlivens you. You might not have your climate action right now. As you develop your action, I'm sure you also have questions. And particularly if you work for a local government, you may be thinking, how are we going to achieve this action? How will this work in my city? Do we have stormwater infrastructure, a zoning code, a building code that needs to be adjusted to account for climate change? How will we pay for this? If you don't work for a city government, those probably are not your questions. But I want to assure you that for each climate action, there are what Deborah just called safe spaces for knowledge sharing and organizing. So find your community. I'm here to talk about the work of one specific community, a space that works to support local climate action and adaptation at the local government level. Next slide. I want to give you a brief introduction to the Alliance of Regional Collaboratives for Climate Adaptation. Formed in 2012, ARCA is a network of leading regional collaboratives and allies from across the state of California that work together to advance adaptation statewide. As the current chair of ARCA, I have the honor and the obligation to share with you the purpose, the principles, and the activities of ARCA. I will start with ARCA's core purpose. As a statewide network, we bring together adaptation thought leaders and practitioners. We work to bolster individual and collective efforts to build climate resilience throughout the state. We foster knowledge exchange, advance regional approaches to adaptation to effectively respond to landscape level impacts, while also promoting collaboration across sectors, disciplines, and geographies. And we serve as a streamlined bidirectional channel between state agencies and regions to ensure that state policies and programs and investments reflect on-the-ground needs. Next slide. Our guiding principles are: consider the health, equity, and safety of all Californians. Focus on the regional level. Empower collaboration across all sectors and levels of leadership. And prioritize forward-looking projects. Next slide. How do we do this? Through three key activities: influencing state policies and programs. ARCA has developed 49 comment letters and recommendations to help improve state guidance documents, funding programs, and other policies. We support a statewide network. We have built a mutually supportive network of resilience practitioners. We organize regular convenings and facilitate knowledge exchange. For example, ARCA hosts a monthly adaptation policy working group meeting for our network, and we have an regularly updated legislative tracker to help you follow the climate adaptation bills that are working their way through the state legislature. The 2025 version of that should be live in the next 2 weeks. And finally, regional capacity building. ARCA has a goal this year to support not just existing climate collaboratives, but like LARC, but also help build the capacity of new climate collaboratives. So we have tools on our website to support that development. You can look at arcacalifornia.org/toolkit. And we're also always glad to connect with new collaborators directly. The ARCA email will be on my last slide. Next step. I hope at this point you want to be part of this network and are wondering, how do I join ARCA? So I want to give you a little bit of an introduction to how ARCA is structured. ARCA currently represents 8 member regional collaboratives. They are listed here on the left on this map. Together, we encompass about 80% of the state's population. We have a formal liaison from the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, and from the Strategic Growth Council. We also have affiliate members, these organizations on the bottom right corner, who are working at the state, national, and international levels. We have an executive committee, which includes representatives from each one of the regional collaboratives, and LCI and SGC serve as ex officio members. Together, we serve as ARCA's decision-making body. So to join ARCA, you have 2 options. First, join your regional collaborative. If you work in a local government in California, or a local government or an entity that supports local government climate planning in California, reach out to your regional collaborative. We're here to help. Each of these 8 regional collaboratives is led by people like me who want to help you solve your problems and achieve your local goals. It brings us great joy to bring these networks and connections together. So these organizations and the ways to contact them are all hyperlinked on this slide. I will drop those slides in the lobby chat in a moment. And if your region was not covered on that map on the last slide, or you work statewide, it may make more sense for you to join ARCA. You can learn more about joining ARCA at arcacalifornia.org/join. And I will close with one final encouragement to find your climate purpose, to join something, and to find your people. So if you think ARCA people may be your people, reach out to us at admin@arcacalifornia.org. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you to our other speakers this evening. Insights, too many to try to summarize. At 5:51, we draw an end to the first day of our climate summit. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.